It's official. Iran has withdrawn from the memorandum of understanding with the U.S. due to the attacks that the U.S. is carrying on Iran, and Iran's retaliating on U.S. bases in the Gulf countries, mainly Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. I'm going to show you some videos of those attacks and discuss what is the objective of Iran, what is the objective of the U.S. right now, and where are we heading towards. Now, the interesting part is that this part of the war seems to be, the US's objective in this part of the war seems to be clearer, which is to degrade Iran's ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. And the way that Iran is controlling the Strait of Hormuz is by creating one corridor that Iran wants all vessels to use and that it is in charge of, and any other routes, Iran is going to deny the passage of those routes by indicating to those vessels, do not pass through. And if they do, they're going to shoot at those vessels to make it dangerous enough such that no vessel is willing and no insurance is willing to move any ships through the non-Iranian designated route in the Strait of Hormuz. Before we go into why this is so important for the US to take back control over the Strait of Hormuz and why it's important for Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz, let's go through what exactly has happened in the past couple of days, especially last night. It seems we've witnessing the strongest response from Iran on Bahrain and Kuwait. So this is from July 12th to July 14th, so the past 3 days. This is the attacks that Iran carried out on the Gulf. So let's start from there. We have in Jordan, 2 air bases, the Prince Hassan Air Base and the Muwafaq Salti Air Base. These are all the bases where America is carrying out its attacks on Iran from. So a lot of the airplanes are based in those air bases in Jordan. They moved a lot of them from the UAE and other countries to safeguard them away from Iran, but they're still using them, or some of them are there to support other actions from the closer bases to attack Iran. Then we have in Kuwait, the ATACAM sites. So these are, if you heard, the HIMARS, which are kind of the platforms from which land missiles are carried out. They launch land missiles into Iran. So these are not defense missiles to defend against ballistic missiles from Iran. These actually go and attack in Iran. So these are offensive equipment that Kuwait, on the border between Iraq and Kuwait, the Americans are using those to attack Iran. And then you have Camp Buhering, Ali Al Salim Air Base, and Al Jabr Air Base in Kuwait. And then there's the Kuwait Navy ship. So there was an actual Navy ship that was attacked with 4 soldiers, apparently Kuwaiti soldiers, that were injured in that attack yesterday. And in Bahrain, there's the 5th Fleet again, and the Isa Air Base in Bahrain that was attacked yesterday and the days before. And on the 12th of July, there was Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar that was attacked, but the past 2 days we haven't seen anything. Some merchant vessels were attacked over here yesterday and the day before, and even near, away from the Strait of Hormuz. So, just see the angle over here. This is away from the Strait of Hormuz. So it's kind of saying, hey, if you're going to do the blockade, because the U.S. has now imposed a blockade, reimposed the blockade back on Iran, well, we're not going to allow any oil to pass through here, even if, they're not even close to the Strait of Hormuz, which is this area over here. And then they've even attacked, 2 days ago, the U.S. Navy Port Duqm in Oman. This was used for refueling the Navy ships which are carrying attacks on Iran. And of course, 2 days ago, Iran was carrying, there was an Iranian airplane that was going from Iran to Sana'a in Yemen, carrying Yemenis, and Saudi Arabia has an embargo on Yemen, and it hit the airport before the airplane lands in the Sana'a airport. And so the airplane had to divert and land somewhere else in Yemen. And in response, Ansarullah in Yemen attacked it shows over here 1 airport, but they attacked 2 airports in Saudi Arabia. So Ansarullah, the Yemen-Saudi conflict seems to also be erupting at this time. And it's crazy to think that Saudi Arabia thought it was a good idea to break the ceasefire that they had with Ansarullah in Yemen to attack an airplane, a civilian airplane landing in the international airport in Yemen, and risk Ansarullah closing Bab al-Mandeb, which is this area over here, which enters into the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal to Europe. And that's the route that has allowed Saudi Arabia to be the least impacted by the close of Strait of Hormuz, because it can export oil from the other side, from the western side of Saudi Arabia instead of the eastern side, where the Strait of Hormuz is. And so it can still export a lot of its oil. But if you close that, then that's a big problem for Saudi Arabia. This was in Kuwait. So big explosions. And it's very worrying that, there's drones, which are very slow. If they can't be intercepted, it means like the Iranians have really destroyed a lot of the defense systems in Kuwait, therefore now allowing slow drones to actually hit their targets, which should be very easily intercepted, unlike ballistic missiles, which are very quick and so harder to intercept. This was in Bahrain, and it looks like a fireworks show almost. So it's not clear whether these are interceptors that are blowing up with a combination of those missiles that Iran has that kind of disperse when they land on their targets. So this was in Jordan, on the air base. You can see over there. It's a big explosion. And we can see from satellite images, which are not very clear, but there has been a lot of damage. So this is the U.S. Command and Control for MQ-9 in Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait. This is before and after. This is the U.S. Drone Command and Control Center in Bahrain. This is a logistic warehouse in Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. So before, and you can see the damage over here. This, I believe, is in Kuwait. It's a big hit. This almost looks like a energy infrastructure hit, but it's not confirmed. So here's a good kind of update from ARIA on the escalation. So the U.S. targeted the barracks of the Iranian Army's 388th Brigade in Bampur, specifically the conscript soldiers' dormitory, resulting in several casualties. The U.S. targeted a mineral water production facility near a village in Ilam province. The U.S. targeted 2 warehouses containing grains and wheat flour in the Khuzestan province. The mayor actually confirmed that. More than 30 civilians were killed in the U.S. attacks in Saudi Iran. The RGC says it targeted several weapon storage, ship parts, and aircraft part warehouses at air base in Bahrain, deployment site of the MQ-9 drones at an air base in Kuwait, destroyed a warehouse belonging to the Kuwait and Gulf Linking Holding Company, which is the largest U.S. Army support center in West Asia, in Kuwait, destroyed the satellite communication center and missile and air defense radar, Patriot air defense system, logistics units, and the HIMARS missile launchers at a base in Kuwait, aircraft shelters hosting a number of fighter jets, and MQ-9 Reaper drones at Al Muwafaq Salty Air Base in Jordan, and the management center and ammunition and fuel storages at the U.S. Navy 5th Support Base in Bahrain. So what is the objective of the U.S. restarting those attacks on Iran? Well, we actually have more clarity now than when they first started the war, because what they're trying to achieve right now is degrade Iran's ability to control or disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, the movement through the Strait of Hormuz. And they're doing that by attacking communication centers where the missiles are being launched, where drones are stored, apparently is what they're saying, but at the same, and also speedboats. But at the same time, we're seeing evidence that they're also attacking water facilities, they're attacking power plants. One incident of a power plant, they were attacking a storage for food. And so they're also imposing economic pressure, not just military pressure, economic pressure on the coastal line, cities and towns. Now, Trump did say that if by next week we're not going to get into an agreement with Iran, then we're going to blow up all their power plants and bridges. And he said that before, and then he backtracked, because that's a crazy, thing to do, because that's going to really hurt the people in Iran. But it seems like they're already starting to do those small attacks on those targets. But the large scale, he says, is going to come next week. We'll see. I hope not. What is Iran trying to do? Well, Iran's trying to degrade America's ability to wage war against Iran. Now, how does America wage its war? Well, it has all those U.S. bases where it doesn't just fly drones or their airplanes from those U.S. bases in the Gulf countries, but they fly airplanes that provide intelligence that allow, for example, the warships, the Abraham Lincoln or the other warships in the Sea of Oman and the Arabian Sea, to carry out their attacks on Iran. And so some of the Gulf countries will say, well, none of the airplanes that are flying from our bases are carrying out those attacks, but they're actually supporting the other equipment, whether it's the Tomahawks or whether it's the fighter jets that are flying from the warships in the sea. But at the same time, there is a lot of evidence that, for example, in Kuwait, they were using the land-to-land missiles. So these are, again, the missiles from the HIMARS platform that launches into Iran. These are not defense missiles. These are offensive missiles to attack Iran. So some of the Gulf countries are using their own land to carry out attacks on Iran. And those are the countries that are being hit the most, such as Kuwait and Bahrain. Now, this is all happening because Iran didn't allow the U.S. to create a southern corridor in the Strait of Hormuz that Iran doesn't control to allow ships to pass through. And the reason why Iran did that was because it wants to control the Strait of Hormuz, because it wants leverage over the U.S. to put pressure on the U.S. to meet its obligations under the MOU. And if the U.S. doesn't meet its obligations, Iran can then kind of reduce the flow of energy that's going through the Strait of Hormuz to put that pressure on the energy markets and on the U.S. economy if the U.S. doesn't meet its obligations. Well, if the U.S. has a southern corridor that Iran doesn't control, that is not part of the northern corridor that Iran controls in the Strait of Hormuz, then Iran loses that leverage. Now, a lot of people said, why did Iran attack those ships? It kind of maybe overplayed its hand. It had a great memorandum of understanding where it was getting so much. Well, a memorandum of understanding is just theoretical things that Iran can get. It's just some words on a piece of paper. Was Iran getting those things? Did Iran, the first point of Lebanon respecting Lebanon's sovereignty? Well, Israel is still occupying Lebanon. The unfreezing of Iran's assets, Iran didn't get any of that unfreezing of those assets that the U.S. has frozen, which is Iran's money. The $300 billion construction fund that everyone was talking about, well, that was going to happen at the end of the nuclear deal that they were going to get into, which they're never going to get into a nuclear deal. No more attacks on Iran. Well, actually, even before Iran attacked any of the U.S. bases in the Gulf countries, the U.S. was attacking the coastal lines of Iran, trying to degrade their ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. And so if Iran isn't getting the promises that the U.S. made as part of the memorandum of understanding, they weren't overplaying their hands. Some people will say, well, they should have just waited. The U.S. would then give it if it sees Iran do certain conditions. Well, Iran doesn't trust the U.S. They entered into an agreement before with the U.S., the JCPOA, the Obama deal, and the U.S., Trump just ripped it apart, even though Iran was meeting all the conditions. So Iran needs to see the U.S. do things, and then Iran does things in tandem with that. They're not going to wait where Iran does its obligations and then the U.S. in a year's time does their obligations. And that's why for Iran, the Strait of Hormuz is extremely important. That puts leverage on the U.S. Now, if Trump just accepted that fact that Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is actually part of the memorandum of understanding, the fifth point, which says that Iran is going to make arrangements for the safe passage. The understanding was that it's under Iran's authority to ensure the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and no one can interfere with that. The U.S. saw that as Iran is going to do that, and then anyone else that wants to do that too with them can do so. But that removes Iran's leverage, and of course Iran wasn't going to accept that without getting anything in return. Now, some people will say, but also the U.S. unsanctioned Iran's oil. Well, that doesn't really affect Iran that much because most of the oil that it exports goes to China anyways. And given the fact that the U.S. can just put sanctions on Iran, as they did, they kind of put back the sanctions on its oil, no one is going to interact with Iran knowing that the U.S. can just sanction that oil, and then they will be in trouble buying that oil from Iran. And so it doesn't matter now whether Iran's oil is sanctioned or unsanctioned because no one's going to buy that oil from Iran. And all that oil is going to go to China anyways, where it doesn't care whether that oil is, sanctioned. In fact, they can get it cheaper if it's sanctioned, so it benefits China. And then you've got people like Dr. Andreas Craig who's saying there's growing resentment towards Iran in all Gulf states towards Iranian coercion and pressure. Every Gulf state rejected the illegal Israeli-U.S. war against Iran. No one wanted to become complicit, except they all allowed the U.S. bases in those Gulf countries to be used to carry out attacks on Iran. So the question of complicit is an interesting one here. Iran had a unique opportunity to rally the Gulf around a shared security framework, one with Iran in good neighborly relations in a post-American region. This unique opportunity is about to be spoiled by the RGC. What good neighborly relationships can you have when a lot of those Gulf countries are using are allowing their bases to be used by the Americans to attack Iran, to kill thousands of their civilians, to kill children in Iran. I mean, if you are Iran, are you not supposed to retaliate against those U.S. bases? Are you not supposed to ensure that those U.S. bases are degraded so that the attacks on Iran are degraded? Who holds responsibility for allowing their airspace, their land to be used against attacks on another country that is your neighbor? Who holds that responsibility? You could say great things about Iran. You could want good relationships with Iran. But if you're still allowing your, U.S. bases and U.S. facilities to operate in your country, and that's being used to kill Iranians, then words don't matter. Then promises don't matter, because what matters is the action that's being taken right now. And so for the only solution to actually good relationships between the Gulf countries and Iran is the removal of the U.S. bases. And instead, in terms of security, because that hasn't brought security to the Gulf countries, that has brought instability to the Gulf countries. And instead, you have a new security framework whereby Pakistan, whereby Turkey, whereby Egypt come and provide that security for the Gulf countries in cooperation with Iran. Doesn't mean Iran has to be part of that new security framework, but you don't have Western influence, American influence, where the objective could be more focused on defending Israel than defending its own U.S. bases in the region, or even caring what happens to the region. And now the problem becomes, what will the U.S. do in Iran? It has two options. It can either accept Iran as the new regional power that controls the Strait of Hormuz, or it can escalate and try to degrade Iran to make it weaker. Now, I don't see America accepting Iran as the new regional power, because what that means is that Iran would have to control the Strait of Hormuz, because that is what it said it wants to do. Because for Iran, that it's leverage over the U.S. By controlling the Strait of Hormuz, it controls the flow of energy, and that could put pressure on the Americans and the American economy. If the U.S. concedes that, if the U.S. accepts Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz, then one, they can wage economic warfare anytime on the U.S. Two, they could put pressure on the Gulf countries to transact oil in non-dollar denominated transactions and favor transactions that are not denominated in dollar. And if that happens, that puts a lot of pressure on the dollar being the reserve currency of the world. A lot of those dollars that are generated from the sales of oil in the Gulf countries are all invested back into the U.S. economy and buy U.S. debt, which makes U.S. debt very cheap, and Americans can borrow cheaply because of all those trillions of dollars that are going from the oil sales in the Gulf countries to the U.S., which actually funds the American military and allows America to be the superpower, but also allows the Americans to be in, $39 trillion in debt without having severe economic consequences, which is the case right now. If the dollar loses its reserve currency, then it's going to be very expensive for the U.S. to borrow. There's going to be less dollars being generated that go into the U.S. economy, and that's going to be crashing the U.S. economy. And that's the reason why it's a high risk for America to allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. But the problem is, escalation isn't going to lead to the objectives that the U.S. wants, which is to degrade Iran. Because Iran is a huge country. It has immense capability to carry out attacks. It has the support of the other superpowers, being Russia and China. And so you need a year war to be carried out against Iran to even come close to meeting an objective such as degrading Iran, if that's even possible. And given that you've depleted your oil strategic reserves, which is providing a buffer, keeping oil prices lower than they should be without any oil shortages, given that you've used years of your ammunition in inventory to attack Iran in the past 130 days, and you would need 200,000 soldiers to even attempt a land invasion, how are you going to do that right now? You can't. The only way you could be doing that is if you postpone this kind of huge escalation to next year. And right now, the objective seems to be degrading Iran's ability to have control over the Strait of Hormuz to remove Iran's leverage, to ensure that the pressure on the U.S. economy is released, and then build up all those things to carry out, your intention of really going after Iran next year. And that's the worry. But even in that case, I don't see the U.S. meeting its objective. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. Iran has a population of 90 million plus people. Iran's military capability is nothing like America has seen in any of their previous wars, whether that's in Afghanistan, whether that's in Iraq, whether that's in even Vietnam or South Korea. And Iran is supported by great powers that will not want to see Iran fall. One, because of the geography of Iran being so close to, it borders Russia. There's only one country between China and Iran, being Pakistan. So having the U.S. bases in Iran is a threat to Russia, is a threat to China. But also all the oil that's in Iran, all the gas that's in Iran, all the minerals, rare earth minerals that Iran has. And of course, for China, they have a rail economic corridor that goes all the way from China to a number of countries, to Iran, and then to the eastern part of Europe. And that avoids the naval route, which the U.S. controls really, and avoids all the choke points such as the Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal. So China can move things through Iran to Eastern Europe, to the western part of Russia. And so that's the dilemma for the U.S. Escalation is going to lead to lots of casualties for the U.S. and, of course, for Iran. And it's not going to, achieve really the objectives that the U.S. wants. So it has to wait a year, maybe even 2 years, to carry out those or attempt those attacks on Iran. But giving Iran the Strait of Hormuz allows Iran to rise as the regional power. And that is not just a threat to the U.S. influence, but of course to Israel in the region. And the U.S. is going to be hard to accept that scenario for the U.S. So we're going to see the U.S. and Iran attempt to degrade each other's capabilities in the next couple of days. And if there's going to be a mass casualty event for the U.S., and that's one of the reasons why I think Iran's avoiding that, such as a sinking of a ship where hundreds of soldiers die. If that happens, then the support for the war is actually going to increase in the U.S. And that might actually be the driver that results in more soldiers going into the region. People think that an event like that will cause you to kind of move back, but in reality, in a lot of instances, it's going to make you move forward, because the benefit of not doing anything and retracting is much less than the benefit of trying to escalate from a political perspective of how you as a leader, Trump, is being seen by your population. Is he going to be seen as weak? If hundreds of soldiers die and he retracts, that's a sign of weakness. People are going to perceive that. But if he moves forward, that's a sign of strength. And there's a rally around the flag effect. In the same way that there's a rally around the flag effect in Iran, when the US attacked Iran, people came together, united more than before the war, against a foreign party that's attacking us, attacking Iran. But some people will say, well, even if Iran sinks a ship, it's a retaliation to the US. But a lot of people won't see that. People are not going to remember, in 130 days ago, the US started this war. Unfortunately, people have a short-term memory. They're going to just think about US soldiers dead, killed. And there's going to be anger, and there's going to push people to put pressure on the president to escalate. If you did like this video, do hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you very soon.